Serving up opinions on a silver platter, it's a grind. The information getting, bringing your got so hot you'll be sweating. These two dudes with attitudes will put you in the mood for a plate full of brain food. So don't delay, my daughter, my son. Visit the buffet called Promoter 101.
Welcome back, friends, to the Promoter 101 podcast. We are so excited to have you join us here for the 246th episode of this podcast. Today, we've got an excellent featured interview. We're going to be joined by Icon's founder, John Stoll, talking about his new role in global touring and his iconic father, John Stoll.
Plus, we'll catch up with the industry news.
The Promoter 101 podcast starts right now.
Hi, this is Jason Kupperman from Paradigm, and you're listening to Promoter 101.
We have a bunch of past Promoter 101 episodes available, and you should go listen to it because, we're there. It's convenient. We've made it possible for you just to go online and Google Promoter 101 in the name of basically anyone that's ever been in the industry, and their interview will just pop up and you just click the link. They're all there, Luke. All the episodes, but almost everybody in the industry has come across our path at some point. We've stuck a microphone in their hand and said, explain that shit.
It's been pretty great. I'm sure you might have some upcoming panels, some upcoming conferences, some ideas of what you want to hear about. I mean, we're always open to ideas, right, Connor?
That's right. As always, feel free to hit us up with your ideas and questions at steiny@promoter101.net.
Of course, conversation keeps going in between podcasts. We're all over the internet. On X, this show is at Promoter101. I'm at W. Luke Pierce. Dan is at The Jew. And over on Instagram and Threads, the show is at Steiny Promoter 101. Dan is at Dan Presents, and I'm at W. Luke Pierce.
Hey, it's J-Bo Lewis from UTA, and you're on Promoter 101.
Hey, Luke, should we talk about what's going on in the industry right now?
Dan, some news breaking right as we're recording this podcast at the end of the week of the 22nd here. Let's start with a big number, $3.4 billion. That is the number reportedly on the table to close for a company that a lot of our listeners have heard of. Certainly some of them work at, but his clients absolutely have. The agency formerly known as Wasserman, the one that now goes by arguably the worst name in music, The Team. Quick recap, it's a wild one. Casey Wasserman, the founder, the guy whose name is literally on the door, stepped away from his agency earlier this year after emails with Jeffrey Epstein associates surfaced in some DOJ files. The agency rebranded, dropped his name, and became The Team, and then a sale process kicked off. So for months, we've been speculating about who's going to buy The Team. Is it going to be UTA? Is it going to be Patrick Weitzel's new outfit? Today, we have a winner, and it's probably the least sexy one. Providence Equity Partners, which is already a majority stakeholder in The Team, they own about 60% of the business, is going to be buying out the rest and taking full control of the company. They value the whole business at a whopping $3.4 billion. Dan, can we riff for a second? One of the biggest names in sports and music is going to be 100% private equity owned. We've had private equity in parts of businesses before, but now for the first time, an agency is 100% controlling an entire stake in a business like this. So your agent still books your tour, but the person that your agent now answers to is a PE fund. PE doesn't buy up talent agencies because they love music. They buy it for a return. They're going to be on a clock with some sort of exit in mind. Now, obviously, they had a stake in Providence, already owning 60% of the team, but I think that's probably going to change some priorities for this business. So which clients get pushed, which deals gets chased, how hard the margin gets squeezed in things. I mean, this is full on stake PE, Dan. This is kind of a first for our business.
Well, let's just do a little bit of the math for a second. If you take $3.4 billion and even at the American Express high yield rate of 3.1% monthly, that would be a return of $8,783,333.33 a month on that money. So they think they're going to do better buying this agency than they are in an $8.7 million return monthly on their cash and now high yield at American Express. So putting in, because 3.4 billion seems like a lot of money, right? It's hard to wrap your head around what 3.4 billion is, but 3.1% of that monthly on a high yield at basically $8.8 million a month is what they've got to beat, worst case scenario, right? So you've now got this bank of money of investors that are just like, earn. You owe the bank a lot of money. And that means somebody's paying attention because that's a lot of money, right? Because where could opportunity cost, right? It could be used somewhere else. It's being used here. And that's the return that agency has to pull off, right? That's what I take from that, Luke. Is that the wrong way to look at that, or is that the right way to look at that?
I think it's one way of looking at it for sure. I look at it this way. Providence had 60% of Casey's business already. Casey had roughly, by most reports, 40% of the business. So if they're offering a valuation of 3.4 for Casey's 40% stake, that means that Casey's going to walk away with about 1.4 billion on this deal. That's all that Providence had to inject into this to take full control of the business. Casey, obviously, I think was, by most reports, seemingly hunting for something north of $1 billion. At times it dropped down here. But what I find kind of insane about this is that the reports say that Wasserman's kind of on track for about $215 million in EBITDA, which values at $3.4 billion this talent agency at 15x. CAA, I don't even think when they did their sale to the French guy even got 15x. So they're saying that this Wasserman deal is by multiplier somewhat more valuable than the CAA deal. What does that say?
Well, if you're only talking about 40%, it brings it down to 3.5 million a month that you would have in return from American Express at that 3.1%. So 3.5 million a month in return. I mean, you could barely live on that.
I don't know how you have a jet and a house in Aspen for that.
True. And you could have a jet and a place in Aspen, but you couldn't afford the lift tickets. Okay, $3.51 million a month in return on 3.1%. on 40% of 3.4 billion of valuation. That's just insane. Yeah. Just the monthly take, right? So it's like the return is insane. Good for them.
You know, and I think interestingly enough here too, you know, like for our world, we spend all this time watching Live Nation or AG or the people that promote the shows, who tickets, who owns the building, whatever. But the agent is on the other side of nearly every deal that's done. The agent decides, you know, what the artist plays and what they play for on what terms. And that layer just kind of got quietly financialized, not consolidation into a competitor like most were speculating that UTA had to buy this or Patrick Weitzel's new sports thing wanted this thing, but it's just bought by straight capital. It's not like a straight one-off, you know, like I would say in our business, because at least in parts of our business for live and for talent agencies, yes, I think it's the first time that a private equity fund has controlled an entire talent agency. But also this month, CVC bought DistroKid, the quote unquote indie distributor, for a little north of $1 billion is what they're reporting on. So an indie agency and indie distributor both go full private equity. The independent world is doing a lot of like the word independent, I think, is doing a lot of heavy lifting these days because it's really not independent anymore. It's private equity controlled. So what's next, Dan? I don't know.
I just wanted to say the monthly return on that 3.1% of the 40% would buy you 585,555 double cheeseburgers at In-N-Out each month. 585,555. I mean,
Casey's a pretty svelte guy. I doubt he needs to eat that many.
I think what I'm saying is he could have all the In-N-Out he wants.
He's pretty well set. I'm sure he'll enjoy the next 2 years as the Olympics come to LA and as he continues to chair the event that everyone's looking forward to in Los Angeles, Traffic-Geddon Olympics 2028. Let's keep going on stories, Dan. There's another kind of financial story that swirled around this month that I thought was pretty interesting. So let's imagine that you walk into a casino and you find out that the guy who owns the casino is also quietly the biggest player at the table. Same chips, better odds, lower fees, and the house has been helping him to win. That's not really a hypothetical here or a parable, Dan. I'm talking about StubHub right now. Here's the story that came out. Came out of StubHub's own SEC filings, which is pretty self-inflicted. Eric Baker, the CEO of StubHub, also runs a hedge fund. It's called Andro Capital. And what it does, it buys up tickets, millions of dollars of concert and sports events in bulk, and then resells them on StubHub. And here's the part that should make every artist and promoter's jaw drop. While a normal seller on StubHub pays around 20% for a seller fee, Andrew reportedly paid zero seller fees for an entire 2 years. Last 2 years of filings, 24 and 25, revealed that StubHub not only didn't charge anything to sell these tickets, but they looked the other way. And it helped cover the fund's ticket management costs through an affiliate called Colloquially Capital and offered short-term financing and referrals to other big professional resellers. This is like a Randy Nichols wet dream right here. You know, I would love to have Randy back on here to talk about this because there's now a proposed class action lawsuit around $5 million, which seems small, arguing exactly that. Deceptive practices, that StubHub and Baker misrepresented the company as a neutral, quote unquote, marketplace when the boss was one of the biggest scalpers on his own platform. It's wild to me, Dan.
You're not just the owner, you're also a customer. I mean, we've seen those commercials for years from the guy that owns Ben Warehouse. Why is it any different from the scalpers? It's not like the scalpers have ever been known for being like fair.
Yeah, this is true.
I mean, oh my God, the guy that's robbing you is also stealing from you at the same time.
I think you got to differentiate the platform under which scalpers sell and then the scalpers themselves, right? Like StubHub, publicly traded company, you know, a quote unquote neutral marketplace, right? It's not that, right? And for every artist or every manager, every promoter that set a ticket price to get, you know, keep tickets in fans' hands, promoters are pricing to fill a room. The whole time, the platform itself, at the end of it, has a chain running up to the CEO. It's like basically running an industrial scale scalping operation through the platform for no fees.
These scalpers are corrupt, you saying? Oh my God, I'm shocked.
Again, platform versus scalpers, right? Like when the big boss is actually a scalper in and of himself and not just some tech resale platform, I think it changes the story a little bit. So
I'm shocked that you're shocked.
I mean, here's what I'm most shocked about is that they put it in an SEC filing. It's like
they have to. It's the rules.
I know they have to. It's the rules. I'm like, you can't fucking change cabs twice and like, you know, put this in some other shell company.
You have to file. You got to file the straight dirt, man. Otherwise, you go to jail. I think what they're thinking is no one was ever going to read the fucking filings because if you ever seen an accurate filing from SEC, the thing is impossible to fucking read. All these prospectuses and all these filings are not exactly user-friendly. They're written by lawyers and legalese, and they're fucking insanely hard to understand. You found a reporter with an education that went to school that knows how to read them, that saw it and broke it down for us. And that's the only reason any of us are talking about it, because none of us would have ever fucking read that thing.
Yeah. I mean, anyone with a $20 Claude or Gemini account can just run an SEC filing through an AI now and be like, what's interesting? I bet that was like the first thing that an AI would shit out for you is like, wow, there's an interesting relationship between the CEO of this company and a hedge fund they're financing to run this stuff. I mean, truly, you know, what's probably it's maybe not the most shocking is that we won't stop using StubHub. I don't say we as an industry or business, but like fans will barely know or barely read about this thing and barely understand what's going on, to your point about a confusing set of filings. We'll just keep on, shit, I need last minute tickets to whatever sport event. Let's go on StubHub. You know, nothing's going to change with this.
You know, I try to go to the verified seller first for the resale, just because there's that much more security in knowing you're getting the actual seat that you're buying.
Yeah. I'll say this, but I use StubHub a lot for sports. I find like, unless there's like some hot shit ticket sporting event, like the couple football games I go to here at Nissan Stadium with the Titans. Now this is a special case because the Titans are big B bad, but like when a team comes to town that I want to see play, I wait until like 11 a.m. before the 12 o'clock game to go on StubHub to get my tickets because they fall through the floor in price. Like I'm an active user of StubHub for sports for sure, because I find that to be a little less resilient in pricing, you know? But I'm the same way with you. Yeah, I'm going to the artist website first. I'm going to the venue website first to find the primary and then go from there. But there are definitely use cases for StubHub out there that I think, you know, make it cheaper to get into a venue.
I gotta tell you, I have found, like, I would see the Cubs last week in Chicago, and I used TM resale to buy my tickets, and I got great seats. I needed 5 together, which is an odd number, but was able to find 5 seats in the 200 level for a reasonable price on resale, and saw a great game from a good place. And the Cubbies won, of course, so that's all the more important. But beautiful day at Wrigley, and I was happy to pay over face to make sure we all had good seats together. But buying them from Ticketmaster guaranteed that we were getting, because they're the ticket provider for that venue. it guaranteed us the better seat. And I've been trying that more and more often. In college, it's a little harder because not every college venue is with Ticketmaster or Access or one of the easier resellers. But that's the hope. Cut out the middleman, go back to the A system, make sure you're not getting screwed. Instead of getting that notice after you've traveled to see a show or a game that, oh, sorry, we're giving you a refund. We didn't actually have that ticket.
Yeah.
Which is something that happens with some of those resellers that aren't verified.
What I took from what you just said is that the Cubs are playing decent ball again, and that there's some good baseball in general being played in Chicago, with the White Sox finally good again. So albeit the Brewers are just cleaning up in the NL Central right now, and the Cubs are 5-7 games behind the Brewers right now. So hoping for a good. Finally the time of year where I finally start paying attention to baseball again. There's not much on. It's all after the All-Star break. It's time to start watching baseball again.
I am going in to speak in Milwaukee at Max this year, and my hope was to catch a Brewers game. So I've never seen a game in that stadium.
Well, hopefully you see the Brewers lose a couple, and the Cubs can inch their way up that NL Central leaderboard.
Now, why would you say that?
Go Cubs. Come on.
All right, I'll give you that.
Last thing here, Dan, I think it's just kind of an interesting story here too, because if you haven't been following, speaking of self-inflicted, places that have self-inflicted wounded themselves, the UK has themselves a new prime minister, Andy Burnham, the former mayor of Manchester. The person running a G7 country would genuinely rather be at a gig than maybe at a cabinet meeting. Andy Burnham took over on the 20th of July after Keir Starmer resigned, and kind of why it landed for me and why I want to talk about in this show is he seems to be one of us. One of the first things he did in office was record himself talking about a video about how he loves to go to gigs, loves to pour a pint, and then how he is helping UK venues to reduce their costs by 20% as one of his first actions as Prime Minister of the UK. Burnham was at the Rolling Stone show at Blackpool's Empress Ballroom in 1989. He called it one of the finest concerts he's ever seen. He's a Smiths fan. He's an Oasis fan. And as the mayor of Manchester, he pulled the Brit Awards out of London for the first time ever and brought it to Manchester. So the guy's been in rooms, he's been to gigs, and he's stepped up in a way as a leader here, reducing costs down for UK venues down by 20% and back to £1 ticket levy. The idea would be to put a small charge on every arena and above show that funnels money back down into the kind of grassroots club level shows. And his government's already floated a £45 million music plan around exports, education, and mid-career artists. Sitting with that idea of a levy for a second, it's maybe the sort of exact medicine that the mid-tier arena and below venues might need, something we talk about a lot on this show, the kind of thinning middle. Stadium tours are fine, rooms that are feeding the business are starving, and a levy at the top might help subsidize the bottom in some way that kind of structurally fixes anyone who's actually started to put something on the table. So if the UK pulls it off, I feel like that idea could travel. It's showed up in conversations and policy thoughts here already in the United States. And so, yeah, in general, congrats to Andy Burnham. This is like the 7th prime minister the UK has had in like 6 years. So we'll see how long it goes for. But it's great to have a genuine fan in a big chair. And so, yeah.
UK politics, what you listen to Promoter 101 for.
Exactly. That'll do it for News of the Month.
Hey, it's Gary Witt from the Pabst Theater Group on Promoter 101.
Of course, this would not be a Promoter 101 podcast without seeing what Dan has said this month on X. Start here. Excuses can be a fun game. When it's clear someone is going to flake, I cannot wait to see what they say when they come back with for why.
Flakiness is only good with pastries, Luke.
Good flaky croissant. Only place it's good in. How about this one, Dan? Is it really major versus indies, or is it really about the personal relationship regardless of the checkbook attached?
I think it's about the business relationship, Luke, but you never really know. Some people are brand loyal.
Some people have a relationship to a checkbook, Dan.
It's deep, Luke.
It's deep. It's deep. Have you ever thought of it like that?
I haven't. You ever looked at the back of a $1 bill, Luke? There's some fucking sketchy shit going on. You ever done it high?
Yeah. Yes, I have. Here's a good follow-up, Dan. People do business with their friends.
Working with people you like, it's just easier, and it can be a lot of fun.
It's very true, Dan. That's going to do it for Tweets of the Month. Make sure you keep up with Dan for more gems. He's at the Jew on X.
Luke, do you think people are still using X?
I think so. I think a lot of our business is still using X. I think it's become more AI slop than other platforms. I think Threads has been a wonderful place to migrate to a lot of these conversations as well, too. Seems like people that jumped off Instagram into the lookalike product in Threads and the meta platform for things are full of great ideas, full of conversations. Basically the same platform, right? So it's either that or Truth Social, Dan. Are you over on Truth Social?
I keep meaning to sign up, but I just haven't.
Well, have I got an offer for you? For $100,000, you can have access to truths from the White House an hour prior to everybody in the market. It's a hedge fund special.
That's just blatant.
Yeah, it's a crazy one. That is an absolute real thing they are trying to do.
Dawn Holiday, Promoter 101.
We're thrilled to welcome to the podcast for the first time Icon's Jesse Stoll. Jesse is a second-generation content promoter and the son of the iconic promoter John Stoll. And Jesse's had his own very interesting path from AG to Icon today, where he is taking a new role in global touring. Please welcome to the podcast, Jesse Stoll.
Jesse, welcome to Promoter 101.
Thanks for having me.
You've had lots of business cards over the year. You've been at Concert West recently, / AEG, working with JV. You originally were at Phantasma, where you worked for your pop, who is an icon to this business. So you were born into this. Let's start there. What was it like growing up in a house with the legendary John Stoll?
Well, I couldn't escape it. The culture was around me. I was fortunate enough to grow up, unlike probably most kids, I was playing basketball backyard, going straight to a concert. Any show I could go to, I attended. It was, a passion of mine, whether it was Aretha Franklin or Kiss, to see any artist, any club, theater, arena show. I wanted to see what the ins and outs of a production, how it all laid out from, settlement to loading the show in to hospitality and catering and just seeing the mechanics of how a show all comes together. And, I spent hours and hours just after school going to his office and hanging with him. We had that, really great mentor aside from a father and just as one of my closest best friends naturally. I always admired and that magic of seeing him operate from building an offer and pursuing it and building that relationship or an existing relationship we have with agents and managers for 20, 30 years to confirming the show to seeing it all come together. That was the process that always enchanted me. So it was a big hobby of mine growing up, just like I said, as much as a kid would go to soccer practice, for me it was go to a show and travel to anywhere in the state of Florida or even travel to Vegas whenever and wherever I can to just, see it all unfold and learn.
So I befriended your dad early on in the industry, and he was quite the mentor because he never really held back anything he had to think about, anything he had on his mind ever. So you got a very unvarnished answer from your father any day of the week. And it was one of the things I really, truly loved about John, and a true independent. But I remember him speaking at Polestar one year and him saying, I don't mind buying a market that's going to lose $10,000 if it's going to get me two other markets that are going to make $10,000, and I'm going to net $10,000 in a week that I wasn't going to get my hands on any show. And I remember walking up to him and saying, how do you know you're only going to lose 10,000? He's like, I think you're missing the point of the economics conversation. You're focusing on the wrong thing. I wasn't getting any of the shows, but because I bought 3 shows, I got to make some money that week. That's what I was focused on. That's what you were missing. But your dad was a next level mind where he saw business where there wasn't business to be had. He got himself into the game in a creative way, in a business where he was competing with Cellar Door, he was competing with Pace, and he was playing a very big game in Vegas at the same time where he was competing with the casinos when it wasn't exactly a level field.
That's really where I feel like, as a guy who the money came from his own pocket. So when it's your own money and you're dealing with, your own pocketbook, it changes the lens of how you approach things. And like you said, the promoter game was heating up heavily in the 80s and the 90s with Pace and Cellar Door. He prided himself on having these relationships with everybody from the early days of Clapton to Seeger to B.B. King to comedy when it was up and coming with the Larry the Cable Guy and Carrot Top and the Comedy Corner he had in South Florida. But one of the plays he was very, very intentional with was, to your point, it wasn't always go for a key major market like Miami, Orlando. It was okay, there's new territories popping up in the 80s and 90s that, in towns that populations were exploding in tertiary and secondary markets like Fort Myers and Lakeland, and where, tourism was booming and people were traveling down for a winter vacation and season, and the Panhandle, Pensacola. So he started really pioneering these areas for growth. And as buildings were being, spawning up with theaters and arenas, he was the first to build those relationships. And it became not so, heavy on just getting the major key markets, but stringing together 5, 6, 7 markets, which, when I started at AEG, when the Florida office was just spawning at AEG, that was where I grinded my teeth was, I mean, as much as I always wanted the major markets, it would be just as important to string together the secondaries and tertiaries where you might do sometimes even better numbers. And again, it helps you develop and solidify that relationship with the band.
When your father passed, the family sold the company that was Phantasma to Live Nation. You went with JV and a handful of other buyers over to AEG simultaneously and didn't stick around to be part of the Live Nation Phantasma system. You and JV have been together your entire career, essentially. What was that like coming up under one of the most iconic buyers in the world?
It was, so the system was just, it felt like I was jumping right in the saddle of comfortability and someone, like you said, that I've known virtually my entire life. All the staff at AEG Florida were former Phantasma employees. So it was family. And kind of looking at what the options were in Florida, it just felt like a natural. The system of how they operate as an independent, and AEG was intelligent, strategic in how they wrapped around the Florida office to this day. I mean, they wanted that independent spirit. They wanted that strategy that worked for however long it did and continues to kind of drive their model to this day. Growing up in a state where there's so many third-party theater options and arena options, not necessarily having a lot of owned and operated rooms, you really grind your teeth and punch harder when you have to learn how to grind co-pros and learn how to strike the best rental deals. And, it's okay if, like I said, if you don't get in Orlando and Miami, it's okay if to build that relationship, get those other secondary and tertiary markets where, you show that you can fight for every dollar for the band and make a dollar where you can. That's the key to being a true promoter.
Now, I have always respected the concept of understanding Florida, which is a different world completely, because it's seasonal. When you've got the winter birds or the blue hares that come down, your population explodes down there. And when they're not there, it decreases quite greatly, right? So if you've got routing on the same act, depending on when they're playing a market, their economics are completely different anywhere in the state. And that's got to be something that's just instilled in you, knowing, all right, I'm getting the avail in winter. That's worth a whole lot more than when I'm getting it in the middle of summer when those folks aren't here anymore and we've got a completely different population base. It's like booking a college town in summer versus you're right in the middle of, fall, right? It's like everything changes economically.
Yeah. And listen, most things that would work in Florida naturally aren't the sexiest. I mean, as much as I love to book the next hot and up and coming alternative electronic act, and there's plenty of stuff routes through Florida, you really got to take your hat off of interest focal points of what you may like to gravitate towards genre wise, and see, like you said, seasonally be intentional with where and when you book, and genre wise, the classic rock acts that come every other year. I mean, JV's made quite the living booking the Styx and the Foreigners and the iconic legacy names that do bigger business in the Southeast than some of the, and anywhere really in the country. And the mantra at the AEG office was always to take your hat off of like I said, a focal interest point, and look at what genre-wise, look at what nothing's off limits. So, I mean, we booked everything from off-Broadway to, non-traditional speakers, to the point of comedy obviously started exploding years ago, but really came into its own. A lot of even the again, not so sexy comedies, the Bill Maher's, the Larry the Cable Guys that, make quite the route hitting hard in Florida. And we'll just do a Florida exclusive run. So the key to success down there is having a neutral hat and really being able to identify all the different cylinders that you can fit into a performing arts center game is key.
You really kind of cut your teeth in the clubs and theaters, but then you really kind of exploded in the comedy world and have had success not only in various genres of comedy, but like well beyond the Florida border as growing into being a national and international tour promoter. What made the leap there? How did that happen?
So comedy for me, I've just always gravitated towards the genre. I feel like it's less red tape when it comes to connecting with the talent, connecting with the production team. I mean, naturally, the obvious, there's less that goes into building out a show until it gets that arena plus level. That personal connection you can build with the talent, with the management team. If there is a manager, a lot of times it's directly with the talent, the talent and the agent. I felt like you could be more intentional and more strategic. And it's something that I've always, just really attached myself to. And look, I think comedy with the digital age and the social media age we're in now has seen that renaissance period. I think we all know that in the last 5, 6, 7 years. And over the years, we've seen so many untapped corners of that, from the speaker game, podcasts, non-traditional Q&A with panels. And so to me, nothing excites me more than identifying something that hasn't gone on the road, that, whether it's an actor or a podcast, where, I can kind of help from ground zero build that and take it on the road in a big way. So one of the big kind of forays for me early on was working with one of my clients, Martin Lawrence. He was a stand-up, obviously iconic from day one, from the Def Jam days, but never really found his own on touring in the early 2000s. I felt like there was some fire still there. The nostalgia factor was coming back in a big way from the 90s. So it was, one show turned into 5 shows, turned into, well, why can't we do this across the East Coast? To, well, we're doing this the right way, clearly, and we're seeing the business expand. Let's see where we can take this nationwide. So that's how the relationship really spawned. And again, it was just exciting seeing someone who's so iconic and legendary in stand-up come back on the scene in a big way and fresh, to that audience. Because again, Ed, I don't know if there was ever like really that he came back and really punched it hard on the touring circuit up until really like the mid 2000s, when I wanted to see where we could go in markets he hadn't been in years. And that was an exciting project. That was like really my first taste to go outside of the sphere regionally. And AEG, I was fortunate enough to work for a company that really gave me the reins to grow when they saw that I had a relationship, unique to the company, and they helped me, they let me embrace that and run with it.
Well, let's talk about that. Like, how does that come together? Because Martin Lawrence hadn't been on TV in, 15, 20 years when you started working with him. There wasn't exactly any reason why anyone else would think that there was magic left in the gas tank there, but you clearly saw something, and at the box office, you confirmed it, that there was still life there and real life there. How did you know? What gave that away? What even made you want to try?
Yeah, I think that nostalgia and people remembering their childhood, remembering those magical moments growing up, we're seeing it in real time now, bigger than ever. Acts that haven't toured in 15, 20, 30 years, that whether it's, the early 2000s now at the Hillary Duffs and the big time rushes that are just like wowing people on the road, coming back in such a big way. I felt like in the urban space, he's the hero from the 90s. There's probably, other than Eddie Murphy, he's the guy. I mean, TV wise, he's the Jerry Seinfeld of that demographic. And I felt like the timing couldn't have been better. And we walked before we ran. We tried a few theaters. We saw the business was hitting. I saw the audiences, just how beloved he was back on the road. You get that hunch when you see how much the audiences attach themselves to someone. And, theaters turned into, 5 to 10 show runs turned into the whole, 15 to 20 show runs turned into, okay, well, let's do the whole country, let's level up to arenas. And then, look, we kept evolving and getting creative over the years, packaging, which is big within that community, and building the building steps of just putting him back out to where he became, one of the big touring comedians in the last decade.
So you just said that community. So let's go there. I mean, this is the R&B-esque African American like community, right? Like not to stereotype, but this is a very Black audience, right?
100%. He speaks to that church. And whether I promote an Indian show, whether I promote a Latin show, or in this case, an urban show, I always tap into having the right promoter partners on the ground. Like we were talking earlier, when you put that hat on of wanting to really know who you're promoting and taking a step back and understanding and harnessing who the act is. In this case, I had the right street teams and the right radio partnerships and making sure I had the right flavor inside of each market. The audience can sniff out if it's not genuine and you're just looking for a money grab. It's got to come from the Martin Lawrence brand. It's got to be, whether you street the ad mat up, whether you tap into all the old school techniques to reach that audience, whether it be, hitting it with the lifestyle accounts, with the barbershops and the markets and the nightclubs and old school flyering and, going heavier on promotional radio giveaways with, liners and all those things. Radio is still super prevalent, as we know, in the urban space. So there's not one size fits all for, you really have to know who the act is. And that was an important piece to the success of the tour.
I think that if you know how to market the act and you've done the research and you're making the investment, you have a right to make a deal with anyone you want. Otherwise, you're saying only a violin player should be able to promote Yo-Yo Ma, which is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
How did the relationship with Martin come about?
That's my buddy Chris Smith at IAG. Chris is a good friend. He worked with my father for years. Martin worked with my father for years back in the late 90s. It was an act that I don't want to say it was in the boneyard with the agency, but I saw an opportunity to say, he'll work, let's try this. And I'm always scouring the agency rosters for opportunities like that even today. Agencies will always be open to taking offers, as we know. And, there's sometimes things out there that, you got that hunch, take a shot, take a few, like I said, a few offers turn. I'm not, I wasn't going in gun heavy with 50 offers, but, I was ready to say, this could be meaningful with this audience. So Chris let me take a shot. Of course, on only a couple, first time where this was the first couple of years that I was, first 4 or 5 years working at AEG. So he wanted to see what we can help deliver and how we do it. And, it would prove to be successful. So
R&D is the basis for this working. You threw some shit on the wall and tried stuff.
That's always been, listen, everybody likes the incoming call, but, growing up in Florida, as we talked about early on, without any owned and operated venues and grinding our teeth on finding the business and I've just never been fortunate enough to be on the side of incoming phone calls. And that's a trait of mine that, I'm grateful from the days of learning how my father was, always on the phone, hammering the lines of, hey, I'm here. I'm going to deliver at the highest level, as another option to the corporate guys out there. And, that's always been, I'm always searching and always trying to be creative and roll up my sleeves and find what's not being done.
So you jumped from AEG concerts in Florida and doing the comedy touring stuff over to Concerts West in the past couple of years before you jumped over to Icon, which we'll get to in a second. And part of that, not only were you touring comedy, you were also involved with some pop music and touring, and you were involved with that last Sabrina Carpenter tour, which had phenomenal success. How did that come to be?
I was on one of the first tours with her in Florida, booked her at the Parker Playhouse, 1,100 seats at the Broward Center. And I was just so stuck. It just nailed my tracks of like the triple threat of dancer, singer, actress. The show was, I saw the magic in a show beyond just music. So I followed her through the years. Obviously, the follow-up record prior to Short and Sweet was just a banger. Producing all the big singles, Feather and everything. And I attached myself to her. At that point, AEG was starting to dig into some of the big club and theater dates as she was rising and elevating. Yeah, I mean, I saw the opportunity to go after this and embrace it in a bigger way. I saw the next follow-up record was had a lot of hype, a lot of big producers tied to it. So it was her time. Coachella was being talked about as a big hook and part of our plan. So I knew that, that coming together would be another notch around the time of when she was releasing Espresso. So I just felt like she did all the right stepping stones to get to where she was. She didn't skip any steps. She didn't go from, clubs to arenas and go elevate too fast. She played what you would consider, underplays in 2,500 to 6,000 seaters, and then we wrapped her in that tour deal. And it was just, lights out, rocket ship from there.
It'll be a fun thing to be on a team like that when you're seeing that kind of success.
Yeah. I think that the real hook for me early on was just that, it's that performanceship that you see on stage. She is an actress first and foremost. And, when you're able to easily transition from on stage from an actress to a musician, you have this full arsenal of talent. It shows. I mean, the show she puts on is just, next level. So that's what really hooked me in, separated her from a lot of the other Disney stars that came out of that circuit.
All right. So let's talk about how Concerts West came to be. Because, you're at AEG. Concerts West is owned by AEG, but Paul and John are legendary epic guys that do Celine and do the Rolling Stones. And man, there doesn't really get much bigger than those two fucking acts. So Tap to work with two iconic concert promoters who do it old school in the best way. It's got to be cool just to be in the room with that. Obviously you recognize the vibe alone because you come from you share the last name Stoll. You got to vibe that right away.
So John and Paul were always close to my father. I kept seeing their name pop up on tours early on in the early 2000s. A lot of the big pop tours from, NSYNC to Backstreet Boys and Britney. And I think there was always that, like you said, iconic growing up in the AEG sphere of it all. Those guys were always highly revered as the forerunners of touring. I saw that as as an opportunity, as my next kind of jump to where I can kind of continue elevating in national and global touring. Who better to, like you said, to learn from than John and Paul. So after meeting them at a couple of Stone shows through Florida, they took a chance on me, which I'm forever grateful for. They were pretty straight shooters with me. It was, hey, we've taken a chance on some people in the past. It hasn't really worked out, but you look hungry. You look like you've got it. We're willing to give you a shot. Come out to LA, and let's see what you're cooking. And they were also pretty transparent as well. As an independent subsidiary within AEG, you've got our resources, you've got our ear. We're here to help, but we're gonna get the fuck out of the way, and you run with it. Again, fortunate enough to grow up without any, I would say, asset or anything to hold on to other than my own relationships and grinding every show out that I had. That was a pretty good saddle to kind of jump right into.
So how do you wind up at Icon, which is where you're at now for the better part of 2 months? Brand new.
Yeah.
Iconic comedy firm. Doug Castro has built a machine over there where they're doing Fluffy and some of the biggest other comics in the world. They rival Outback for some of the biggest comedy tours in the world. And obviously as an independent, next level stuff, but they're part of a bigger consortium too, which I'll get you to talk about in a second. But let's start with Doug's team at Icon and how you wound up there.
Yeah, so Icon for me was, I've always had the utmost respect for Paul Maloche, president here. I've co-pro'd on with him for years whenever we did dates on the East Coast, and always as an independent fighting in an aggressive, competitive landscape. As we all know, I've always had the utmost respect in how he's operated, grace, and retained these relationships for many years. And for me, I have a lot of respect for Outback and what they've built. Of course, Live Nation and Will's is in his department. AEG, I felt like there was a void in the comedy space to really grow the portfolio, and we were making some great waves, but I wanted to be able to run further with with more of a green runway to build it out, a team. And, Icon recently, in the last couple of years, became part of the greater Live Co. Holdings team, which includes Peachtree, TPR, a juggernaut in the Christian music space. And again, felt like the real path for me to kind of go back to my roots and run in a runway that I have to really, really elevate something and develop more of my portfolio. And I felt like this was like a great home for me. So focal points, comedy and non-traditional, but listen, the team's been very empowering to grow in music as well. And a lot of my relationships do fall outside of just comedy, non-traditional, and also, international. I want to continue to grow the team here. The lens to not only focus on North America, but there's a whole, as expansive world to not only export artists out internationally and import them in North America and tour them, but also, tour more internationally for comedy and music, etc. So
When you think the name Milosh and Castro and Icon, you don't really think of international or music. You think comedy, and when you hear international, you think maybe they went to Toronto with a comic. Well, and I don't get the sense you're talking about just a Canadian tour when you say international, and actually getting into things that require more than just a microphone and a spotlight. So what's the vision? And that's a big, huge paradigm shift for them.
it's certainly not going to be, it's going to be a walk before we run sort of move. It's not there's not, I don't want to ever think contained to the definition of growth. Liveco is one of the biggest independent promoters at the moment in the country. And, in order to continue seeing growth, you got to think globally. I think that, I think we all see how fast other countries are growing their talent, whether it's, East Asia, Southeast Asia, whether it's comedy, whether it's music, on the genre front. I see the true definition of a national promoter should be thinking, how do we bridge the gap with the rest of the world? And so, again, core being comedy and non-traditional, but I really want to make sure that nothing's off limits. If there's a real opportunity, it's all about the people embracing the people embracing a tour project. So we can execute just as high level on a music tour as we can with comedy. We've got top level production people. We've got top level marketing people, a lot of who have came from the music space. We're hungry to show that we're players beyond just, one pigeonhole genre of comedy and non-traditional. And, as I've kind of mentioned early on in the call, I have partners. We continue to build out our global footprint, make sure we're doing it the right way whenever we venture over into whether it's Australia or, Asia or Europe, but intentional and strategical and how we build this footprint outward.
Sounds like there is eyes for big growth all the way around.
Yeah. And I think it's important to think that way when you're, look, it's a very competitive space right now. And as we all know, and, to stay strong as an independent, it's, noticing your strengths, of course, and where we've been able to thrive, but not just thinking, here's where we're going to be in 5 years in the same space. Otherwise, I feel like growth is, if you don't think of where you're going to grow in 10 years and where you can really take it to next heights, where are we going to be? So.
No, it's a game changer for them and a game changer for you, obviously, with the building blocks to grow a company on an international footprint like that. Seems like a pretty big challenge.
I'm up for it.
Before we close out, what's the philosophy that you work under currently that keeps you moving day after day? How do you outline your vision for the business?
There's one thing that I remember my dad always saying growing up, not just business, but it flowed into his personal life. And that's do the right thing. We know how a lot of people in this business can lose sight of being honorable, being loyal, being honest. I really try to go on a daily basis. It's hard sometimes, you get screwed over, you lose a tour, you lose, someone wasn't loyal to you. And, I battle with that internally because it is business. You got to remember, it's at the end of the day, it is business and there are political factors, whatever it may be. But to me, I always try being the most loyal to my partners, staying straight. And I remember I came from a family where my dad fought for every single dollar in his pocket. So, the settlement down to the penny mattered, and fighting for every dollar mattered, and fighting, and your word is all you really have. I sell myself on that my word and my quality of service, so do the right thing.
I can't thank you enough for taking time talking to me about your dad and your path and working with Martin Lawrence and growing your business into an international legacy, as well as starting out in the early days in Florida. So to see that path grow is kind of an awesome thing. And to hear you say some stuff that I know I could have heard come right out of your dad's mouth throughout the course of the conversation was fun for me too.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate having me here, man. It's an honor. I'm proud to be here.
Fergie, Tour Design. I'm on Promoter 101.
Quote of the month. Life is about making an impact, not about making income. Kevin Cruz.
Dan, off the record here, we just had a long conversation about money and impact and all those things. And I didn't even know this quote was coming up out of it. So what a deep thing and a nice callback to something that really does matter in this day and age.
This is Charles Attell, C3 Presents, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Thank you all for joining us for the 246th episode of Promoter 101. We are so grateful to all of our listeners, for everyone who tunes in and supports this podcast. I don't know what the time went on this one, Dan. This one was a great one. I had a great time on this one. So until next time, thanks for listening. If you miss us and you want to hear from us, hit us at stein@promoter101.net.
As always, we want to thank you so much for your time. We're honored that you joined us this week. We will return again on August 26th and every last Thursday of every month moving forward.
Our August episode will feature
Scott Sokol from Pinnacle Entertainment, and I'll be on next month's episode of Promoter 101.
We'll see you in August, and we're wishing you sold-out shows for the month to come.
Cheers!
Call your mother.
Visit the buffet called Promoter 101.